The sound of pounding hooves echoed across the redstone valley long before she dared to look over her shoulder. Dust rolled behind her like a rising storm as the hunters closed in, shouting to each other as if they were chasing nothing more than a fleeing deer. Yet she was no animal. She was a young woman fighting for the thin thread of life still holding on inside her. Her name was Lyria, and she had never imagined that one wrong turn on the canyon trail would put her at the mercy of men who believed they could take whatever they pleased from the land and the people living on it. Her breath burned. Her legs trembled. The desert wind whipped her hair into her eyes. But she kept running because stopping meant danger she refused to surrender to. The old American frontier was known for its harsh laws, and most of those laws were written by fear, pride, and gunpowder. Lyria had seen enough of it to know that some men shaped the land with kindness while others scarred it with cruelty. The ones behind her belonged to the second kind, riding hard through the canyon walls that glowed beneath the late sun. Their horses thundered forward as if smelling victory. Their voices carried through the air, reminding her that she was far from safety and even farther from anyone who might hear her cries. Every echo pounded against her ribs like a reminder that she did not belong to anyone. She belonged to the wind and the will to survive. Her boots slid in the soft red sand as she stumbled around a boulder, hoping the twists of the canyon would confuse the riders. For a heartbeat, she believed she had gained a few precious steps, enough to breathe without breaking inside. Then she heard the crack of a whip slicing through the air. Fear pulsed through her bones, but she did not scream. There was no room for weakness, not today, not with hunters who prided themselves on the chase. She pressed a hand against her chest, steadying the panic rising through her body. She forced herself to push forward, one step after another, praying the canyon would deliver her a way out before the horsemen surrounded. Yet, fate had its own path as she rounded another bend. The canyon opened into a narrow passage, and that was when she saw him. A lone figure sat tall on a dark horse, the last rays of sun striking across his bare shoulders like fire. His presence filled the silence in a way nothing else ever had. Steady and powerful, as if the land itself had carved him from stone. He was an Apache warrior, known in whispers across the frontier. A man who carried the strength of the mountains and the silence of the night. His name was Kale, and though Lyria had never met him before, something in the way he watched her made her feel as if he had been waiting for this very moment. Kale's gaze flicked from her. Trembling form to the dust cloud rising behind her. The hunters were close, too close for comfort. He tightened the grip on his reins, the leather creaking softly under his hand. His horse snorted, sensing the tension ahead. Lyria slowed, unsure whether this warrior would help her or turn away like so many others had done when danger approached. But there was a calm in his eyes, a calm that did not match the thunder behind her. It was the calm of a man who had lived through storms and learned to stand against them without fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words died on her tongue as the hunters appeared around the bend. Their horses charged forward, their smirks wide and unbothered, certain she had nowhere left to run. One of them pointed at Kale, laughing as if the warrior would simply move aside, but Kale did not move. His face remained still, unreadable, yet something in the air began to shift. It was as if the land itself paused to watch what he would do next. Lyria felt her heart hammer as the riders approached. She backed against the canyon wall, breathing hard, her eyes darting from Kale to the hunters. She was caught between the danger she feared and the warrior she did not know. For a moment she wondered why he sat so quietly, why he had not drawn a weapon or signaled for her to hide behind him. But then she noticed the way his shoulders dropped, the way his jaw set. Kale was not calm because he lacked concern. He was calm because he had already decided what needed to be done. One of the hunters raised his hand toward Lyria, calling out that she belonged to them now, that she should stop running. Another rider laughed, mocking the lone Apache warrior as if he were nothing but a shadow in their path. The canyon filled with the arrogance of men who had never known fear, who had never faced a force stronger than their own misguided confidence. Kale finally moved. He swung down from his horse with a swift, fluid motion, landing on the canyon floor with the grace of a man who knew every grain of sand beneath him. His braids fell over his chest as he stepped forward, positioning himself between Lyria and the hunters. The air thickened with tension. Even the horses seemed to sense that something had changed. The hunters slowed their approach, no longer laughing. Cale's presence had shifted from silent observation to an unspoken warning. His voice carried through the canyon deep and steady, telling them she was not their prey, that the land did not belong to men who hunted the innocent. Lyria felt her breath catch. She had never heard such resolve spoken with so few words. The lead hunter sneered and told Cale to step aside. He claimed they had business with the girl. Cale's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed in a way that made the canyon walls seem to close in. Before the rider could speak again, Cale took a single step forward. That one step said more than any threat could have. It was a promise that he would not let her fall into their hands. The tension snapped like a stretched rope. One rider spurred his horse forward, trying to rush past Cale. In that instant, Cale moved with speed so sharp, Lyria barely saw it. His hand grabbed the horse's bridle, yanking the animal sideways, forcing the rider off balance. The man's shout echoed across the canyon as he stumbled from the saddle. Dust flew into the air. The other riders shouted, scrambling to regain control of their horses as Cale positioned himself like a shield in front of Lyria. The canyon trembled with movement. Hooves struck the earth. Shadows shifted across the red stone walls. Lyria pressed a hand to her chest, unable to look away from the warrior who had chosen to stand between her and the danger breathing down her back. She felt something fierce rise inside her, a mix of fear and hope she had not felt in years. Cale's horse pawed at the ground behind him, ready for whatever came next. The hunters glared, no longer certain of their advantage. The lead rider raised his hand again, signaling his men. It was clear a confrontation was seconds away. Lyria's breath trembled as she realized there was no turning back now. Cale had thrown himself into the storm, and by standing near him, she had stepped into it too. The canyon waited, silent and tense, as the hunters prepared to charge once more. And Cale, the Apache warrior who had leaped from his horse to save a stranger, lowered his stance, ready to fight for a woman he had not known until this moment. What happened in the next heartbeat would change both their lives forever. But that moment had not yet arrived. Not yet. Cale stood firm as the canyon wind brushed against him, carrying the smell of dust, sweat, and the heat of the land. The hunters tightened their grips on their reins, hesitant yet unwilling to back away. Lyria could feel her heart beating hard against her ribs as she looked from the warrior's broad back to the men who wanted to drag her away. She did not know why Cale had stepped in for her. She did not know what drove a man to risk himself for someone he had never met. But she sensed there was something in him that refused to let cruelty decide the fate of another living soul. The canyon held its breath as Cale waited for the riders to make their next move. But instead of charging, the hunters slowed, their eyes narrowing with frustration. The lead rider muttered something under his breath, lowering his hand just a little. Cale noticed. Lyria noticed. The moment stretched thin, fragile, and full of danger. The riders were not retreating, but they were no longer rushing forward either. They were calculating. Cale's gaze shifted for only a moment, long enough to glance back at Lyria. Her breath caught. In that single look, she saw a quiet understanding pass through him, as if he recognized her fear and silently promised that she would not face this alone. Then he turned his attention back to the hunters, his posture steady, his shoulders squared as the canyon sun dipped lower behind him. One rider finally spoke, telling Cale she had caused trouble that was not his concern. Lyria felt her stomach twist at the words. Trouble. That was what she had become to so many people. Yet Cale stood without moving. His calm voice carried across the narrow passage as he told them the land did not bend to their claims. He did not raise his tone. He did not threaten. Yet every word settled in the air like a warning the hunters could not ignore. They stared at him, confused by the ease with which he held his ground. Eventually, the lead rider pulled his horse back a few steps, motioning his men to shift aside. But his eyes remained locked on Cale with a promise of return. The riders slowly turned their horses, forming a half circle as if deciding whether to test his resolve, or come back when the canyon was darker and the odds felt more certain. Lyria watched them with trembling hands, knowing their departure did not mean safety. It meant delay. Cale waited until the last horse disappeared behind a curve in the canyon. Only when the echoes of hooves faded did his shoulders drop slightly. He turned toward Lyria, the late light softening the sharp lines of his face. She felt her breath steady for the first time since the chase began. He approached her with slow, careful steps, not wanting to startle her any more than she already was. She tried to speak, but only a thin whisper left her mouth. He lifted a hand to gently motion for her to breathe, to take her time. She nodded, clutching her arms as if trying to hold herself together. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to explain what those hunters wanted from her. But her words tangled inside her chest. He stood close enough that she could see the quiet strength in his eyes, yet far enough that she did not feel crowded. He asked her softly if she was hurt. She shook her head, though her legs still trembled. Cale studied her for a moment before glancing toward the path the hunters had taken. His voice lowered when he told her they would not stop looking. Lyria felt her stomach tighten as the truth settled over her. The chase was not over. The danger had only paused. Cale motioned toward his horse and told her they needed to move, that the canyon would not protect them once night reached the valley floor. As she followed him, her mind rushed back to the town she had left behind, to the small cabin she once cleaned, to the quiet life she believed she could protect if she kept her head down. But keeping quiet had not saved her. It had only made her easier to hunt. She remembered the first time she saw the hunters enter the settlement. They had ridden through the main road with the confidence of men who believed the world bowed to them. People avoided their eyes. People whispered about their tempers, their dealings, their greed. Lyria kept her distance, hoping their interest would never fall on her. But trouble has its own way of choosing its path. She did not know what Cale saw in her as he helped her climb onto the horse. But when she settled behind him, gripping the belt around his waist, she sensed he understood that her story held shadows she was not ready to name. His horse moved forward with steady steps, carrying them deeper into the canyon. The air cooled as the sun lowered behind the towering walls. Lyria rested her cheek against Cale's back. Finding comfort in the quiet rhythm of the horse beneath them, Cale led them through narrow trails carved by time. He rode with purpose, as if he knew every turn, every hiding place, every stretch of land where a person could disappear from danger. Lyria wondered where he had come from. What life shaped him into a man who would leap from his horse to defend a stranger? The winds of the frontier often shaped people in difficult ways, but his strength felt different. It carried a sense of honor that did not show itself loudly, yet it was impossible to ignore. Eventually, Cale slowed his horse near a wide ledge overlooking the valley. From there, Lyria could see the long stretch of desert far beyond the canyon. Golden earth rolled toward the distant mountains. The world felt both enormous and fragile. Cale dismounted and helped her down, making sure she steadied herself before letting go. He told her they would rest for a moment, but only a moment. The hunters would try to track their trail. They needed to stay ahead. Lyria sank onto a flat rock, her chest rising and falling as she tried to gather strength for what came next. Cale remained standing, scanning the canyon entrance as if listening to the land itself. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was a space she needed, and he seemed to know that without her saying a word. After a while, he turned to her and asked where she had come from, how she ended up running alone through the canyon. She hesitated, not because she wished to hide anything from him, but because the truth felt heavier than she was ready to voice. She lifted her eyes to the horizon before answering him. She told him she had been living in a small settlement near the river, working as a helper in a home owned by a stern couple. They were not unkind, but they kept to themselves, and she had learned to stay out of the way. When the hunters came to town, everything changed. Cale listened without interrupting, his eyes focused and steady. Lyria explained how one of the hunters claimed she had something belonging to him. She still did not understand what he meant. He accused her of hiding something, demanded she go with him until she confessed. The townsfolk looked away. No one stepped forward. She ran because she knew the look in that man's eyes. She ran to protect her life, even if she did not understand what she was being blamed for. Cale's jaw tightened at her words. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen this kind of cruelty before. He told her that men like those hunters used lies to control the weak, and that the frontier had become a place where justice depended on who held the louder voice. He said the land was changing, and not all changes brought peace. Lyria asked him why he chose to help her. For a moment he did not answer. He looked toward the canyon again, as if choosing his words with care. Then he told her he had seen enough suffering in his life to know when a person ran from fear, not guilt. He said her eyes carried the truth. The land had placed their paths together for a reason she would understand later. His words settled deeply in her chest, warming a place she had long kept cold. The sky darkened as twilight crept across the valley. Cale mounted his horse again and offered his hand to her. She took it without hesitation this time. As they rode away from the ledge, Lyria looked back once more at the canyon. Knowing it held secrets she had not yet uncovered, she sensed the hunters were not far. She sensed their return would come with greater force. And she sensed Cale was tied to this danger, in ways she could not yet explain, but she also knew that night ahead would reveal more than she expected. And none of it would be simple. If you want the next 1,200 words leading deeper into the conflict, I'm ready. Night settled over the desert like a heavy blanket as Cale guided the horse away from the canyon and toward a ridge hidden between tall stone walls. The sky glowed with stars, scattered across the darkness like sparks from an unseen fire. Lyria held on to him as the wind brushed against her face, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. Even with the distance they had put between themselves and the hunters, she could not shake the feeling that danger still followed close behind. Her mind replayed the chase, the shouts, the look in their eyes when they claimed she belonged to them. The frontier was wide, yet somehow it had never felt smaller. Cale slowed the horse as they approached a cluster of rocks forming a natural shelter. He lifted Lyria down gently, noticing the stiffness in her movements. She stood quietly, brushing the dust from her dress as Cale walked around the ridge, checking the shadows for any sign of pursuit. His steps were silent, almost part of the land itself. The warrior moved like someone who had survived countless nights beneath open skies. Listening to sounds most people ignored, Lyria's eyes followed him as she tried to steady her breathing. She wondered how a man like him learned to read the land so well, how he grew into someone who stood between danger and a stranger without hesitation. She wanted to trust him, yet part of her still feared the unknown. Every choice she made tonight would shape her life. Every direction Cale chose could be the path to safety or deeper trouble. Cale returned to her with a calm expression, though she sensed a steady alertness beneath his quiet movements. He told her they would rest here for a short while, but he would not sleep. The hunters had too much pride to let the chase end. Men like them did not give up the moment they hit a wall. They circled back, they waited, they planned. Lyria swallowed hard. Understanding that Cale's protection came with risks neither of them had yet named. She sat beside the rocks, drawing her knees close as the night air cooled. Cale kept watch at the ridge's edge, his silhouette tall against the moonlit sky. Lyria wondered what thoughts sat behind his steady gaze. She knew there had to be more to him than what she saw. No one carried that kind of strength without carrying a story, just as heavy. Her thoughts drifted to the settlement she had left behind. She wondered if anyone there had noticed she was gone. The couple she worked for had locked their doors early, pretending not to hear the riders calling for her. She felt a small ache in her chest, the kind that came from knowing no one would follow her trail or ask what became of her. She had always tried to be honest, to do her work well, to avoid trouble. That had not been enough. She never imagined she would run through the desert for her life. Chased by men who believed they had the right to claim her, Cale broke the silence, asking if she remembered anything unusual that happened before the hunters singled her out. She hesitated, sorting through memories she had pushed aside in her panic. She mentioned the day she found a small bundle near the river, wrapped in leather and tucked beneath reeds. She had not opened it, thinking it belonged to someone who would come back for it. When she turned it in to the couple she worked for, they told her to forget it. She never saw it again. But she remembered the way a stranger in town had watched her afterward, as if waiting for her to slip. Cale listened carefully, his expression tightening. Items left behind in the frontier, often carried weight. Some held personal value. Others held secrets. Cale asked if she knew what was inside the bundle. She shook her head. Part of her wished she had never seen it at all. But something about Cale's reaction told her it mattered now more than ever. Cale looked toward the distant horizon, the moonlight striking across his features. He told her quietly that certain groups wandered the frontier in search of things that did not belong to them. They traded in stolen items, secrets, and lies. Sometimes the item itself was harmless. Sometimes it carried meaning for someone powerful. Lyria felt her heart drop as she asked if the hunters believed she still had the bundle. Cale nodded slightly, confirming what she feared. Lyria pressed a hand to her stomach, overwhelmed by the idea that her life had been turned upside down by something she had simply found near the river. She had no answers for the hunters. She had no way to explain that the couple she worked for had taken the bundle from her. She did not even know if they still had it. But the hunters did not care about truth. They only cared about claiming what they believed she had hidden. Cale placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her. He told her they would find the truth, but first they needed to stay ahead of the hunters. He explained that the desert was large, yet not large enough to outrun men who could track footprints, broken brush, and horse trails. They needed a place where the land favored them, somewhere the hunters would hesitate to ride into. Lyria wondered where that could be. The frontier was wide but filled with places ruled by danger. Cale told her they would travel toward an Apache encampment hidden deeper beyond the ridge. He said his people would offer guidance, perhaps even protection, but she must trust him. She agreed, though her voice shook. She did not know what to expect from his people. Yet Cale had shown her more care in one day than most had shown her in years. Before they could leave the ridge, a new sound drifted in on the wind. Hoofbeats, soft at first, then growing louder. Cale's hand dropped to the knife at his side as he motioned for Lyria to stay behind the rocks. Her breath caught as she crouched low. The hoofbeats slowed, stopping somewhere beyond the ridge. Voices murmured. Not the hunters, she realized. These voices sounded younger, calmer, and unfamiliar. Cale stepped forward, letting out a low call that echoed across the ridge. The voices answered. A moment later, 2 Apache riders emerged from the shadows, both younger than Cale, but carrying the same steady strength in their eyes. They greeted Cale with respect, speaking in their native tongue before turning curious glances toward Lyria. Cale explained her situation in a few quiet words. The younger riders exchanged tense looks. One of them told Cale that the hunters had passed through the northern trail earlier, demanding answers from anyone they found. They were not hiding their intentions. They wanted the girl, and they were willing to overturn the land to find her. Lyria felt a chill spread through her chest at the news. The hunters were widening their search. The danger was tightening around her, not fading. Cale asked the riders to return to the encampment and alert the elders. The riders nodded and galloped off into the night. Lyria rose slowly from behind the rocks, watching them disappear like shadows swallowed by the desert. She asked Cale if his people would be angered by her presence. He told her they did not turn away those who needed help, but they would want to understand why hunters crossed their lands with such boldness as they prepared to leave. Lyria asked Cale something she had been holding back since the chase began. She asked if the hunters could be connected to him in any way. She did not mean blame, but curiosity. Cale paused before answering. He told her there were people who resented the Apache, who feared their strength, who spread lies to gain control. He said the hunters served those kinds of men. It was possible they carried grudges older than either of them understood. The thought unsettled her. She wondered if their paths had crossed long before today. She wondered if the bundle she found was tied to something larger, something dangerous enough to make strangers chase her through canyons as if she were a threat. Cale mounted the horse and pulled her up behind him. They began moving again, riding into the deep stretch of night. Lyria rested her forehead against his back, feeling the tension in his muscles. The stars above them shimmered with cold light, guiding their path across the wild frontier. As the horse carried them toward the unseen encampment, Lyria felt the weight of the unknown press closer. The hunters were not the only danger in the night. Secrets were rising from the land, weaving their stories around hers. Somewhere ahead waited answers she did not yet understand. Somewhere behind roadmen who refused to let her escape, and the desert, wide and endless, felt tighter with every mile they crossed. The night deepened as Kale and Lyria rode across the wide desert, the sky stretching above them like a dark river full of silent stars. Each mile they crossed felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself sensed the danger closing in behind them. Lyria held Kale tightly, hearing the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them and the soft rustle of wind sweeping across the open plains. She wanted to believe they were getting closer to safety, but every shadow felt like a possible threat. Her heart did not fully settle. It's not even when the lights of a distant Apache camp flickered like fireflies along the ridge. Kale guided the horse toward a narrow trail that led them between tall stone cliffs. He rode with sharp awareness, glancing back every so often to make sure no riders followed. Lyria could feel the tension in his body, the way his shoulders tightened with each glance. He finally spoke, telling her they were near his people's land, but that did not mean danger had passed. The hunters were bold men. They would not hesitate to trespass onto ground they had no right to touch. The crackle of small fires reached Lyria's ears before she saw the camp itself. It sat tucked beneath an overhang where the desert met a grove of twisted trees. As they approached, several Apache men stepped forward, holding torches that cast warm light across their faces. They recognized Kale at once, greeting him with an expression of relief and concern. But when they noticed Lyria behind him, their expressions shifted to curiosity, even caution. Kale helped her down from the horse and told her to stay close. She nodded, gripping her hands together as he spoke to the men in his native language. She could not understand their words, but she understood their tone. They were questioning, worried, alert. Moments later, an elder stepped forward. A tall man with gray streaks in his hair, and a voice that carried strength even in silence. Kale bowed his head slightly, speaking with deep respect. The elder's eyes rested on Lyria for a long moment before he asked Kale a question that made the warrior's jaw tighten. Kale explained the chase, the hunters, the bundle she once found near the river, and how the riders believed she still held something valuable. The elder listened without interrupting, his face steady but unreadable. When Kale finished, the elder turned to Lyria with a gentler gaze, asking in clear English if she feared the men hunting her. She answered softly that she did. The elder nodded, as if confirming something he already sensed. He motioned for them to follow him deeper into the camp. Lyria walked beside Kale, aware of the eyes watching her from every direction. Children peeked from behind tents. Women paused at their fires, whispering quietly. She felt out of place, as if she had stepped into a world she was never meant to walk through. Yet Kale's presence kept her grounded. Every time she felt her courage slipping, she sensed his steady gaze near her, reminding her that she was not alone. The elder led them into a small clearing where a stone table sat beneath a canopy of hanging branches. The firelight cast flickering shadows across the stone surface, making it look ancient and powerful. The elder said this was where truth was shared. He asked Lyria to tell her story again from the beginning. She took a slow breath and explained everything she remembered. She described the bundle, the way she turned it in to the couple she served, and how the hunters arrived soon after. Claiming she had stolen something as she spoke, she noticed Kale watching her carefully. Not with doubt, but with a protective sort of awareness. He stood close, ready to speak if her voice faltered. When she finished, the elder stepped closer to the stone table and reached into a pouch. He placed a small leather bundle onto the surface. Lyria froze. It looked familiar. Too familiar. It was shaped like the one she found near the river. The elder said it had been brought to them months ago by a young scout who believed it carried something important. But no one had opened it yet, as it did not belong to them. Kale's eyes widened slightly. Lyria swallowed hard and stepped forward, explaining that the bundle she turned in had never been returned to her. She wondered if this was the same one, or if there were more than she realized. The elder said such bundles were often passed between hands quickly, especially if they carried something valuable or dangerous. He told Kale that men like the hunters often served wealthy land. Barons or traders who wanted control over information or sacred items. Lyria felt a cold wave travel through her as she realized the hunters might not care about her at all. They cared about what she had seen, touched, or unknowingly become part of. Cale asked the elder if they knew what was inside the bundle. The elder shook his head and said some things were meant to be opened only when the right moment arrived, and he believed that moment had not yet come before Lyria could ask more. The sound of distant horses drifted through the camp. Every warrior in sight turned sharply. Cale moved closer to Lyria, placing a steadying hand on her back. The elder looked toward the valley with narrowed eyes. The hunters had returned. This time their approach felt heavier, more deliberate. They were not searching randomly. They were coming straight toward the camp. Cale's voice dropped low as he told the elder they needed to move quickly. The elder agreed, giving orders to the warriors to prepare defenses and position scouts in the shadows. The camp stirred with urgency. Men grabbed bows, knives, and spears. Women pulled children inside shelters. Fires were covered to dim the light. The entire place transformed from peaceful to battle-ready in moments. Lyria felt her knees weaken when she realized the hunters had followed them across miles of empty desert. She wondered if they had tracked footprints, horse trails, or simple instinct. Either way, they were close. Too close. Cale turned to her and told her she needed to stay near him at all times. She nodded, though her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe as darkness thickened. The thunder of hooves echoed through the valley again. Torches appeared in the distance, small flames bobbing in the night like angry stars. Lyria could make out the riders' silhouettes lined up across the horizon. Their numbers looked larger than before. She did not know if they had gained more men, or if fear distorted her vision. Cale stood in front of her, steady and unshaken as he studied the approaching riders. His face carried a calm fierceness she had never seen before. The elder stepped beside him, lifting a staff carved with patterns Lyria did not understand. The warriors spread out behind them, blending into the shadows like part of the land. The riders came to a halt at the edge of the camp. Their leader shouted into the night, demanding they hand over the girl. His voice carried across the valley with a harsh confidence that made Lyria tremble. Cale did not move. The elder did not answer. The silence between the two sides pressed tight against the earth. The leader shouted again, louder this time, claiming they were trespassing on land that did not belong to them. Cale finally stepped forward. His voice rang across the night, strong and clear, telling them that this land belonged to the Apache, and no hunter had the right to raise a torch here. The leader snarled back, saying they did not care who claimed the land. They wanted the girl, and they would burn their way through if they had to. Lyria felt fear wrap around her like a cold rope. She wondered how long this standoff could hold before the riders charged forward. She wondered if the Apache warriors could withstand so many armed men. She wondered if she herself was the reason these two groups now stood on the edge of a fight that could spill blood over something she did not even understand. Cale walked back toward her, his gaze deep and steady. He told her they might be forced to run again if the riders attacked. She nodded, unable to speak. She could feel the tension in the air tightening, as if the land itself expected a storm to break at any moment. The riders shifted in their saddles, torches burning bright. The Apache warriors pulled their bows taut ready. Lyria stood frozen between them, the night wind wrapping around her like a warning. The leader raised his. Armed Cale reached for Lyria's hand. The world held still, balanced on the edge of something that could change everything. The moment before the storm. The moment before the first spark. Nothing had broken yet, but everything was about to. The moment the leader raised his arm, the night held its breath. Torches flickered, shadows stretched, and every heart beat like a drum ready to break. Lyria felt Cale's hand tighten around hers, steady and warm, grounding her even as the world around them threatened to explode. The riders leaned forward, ready to charge. The Apache warriors pulled their bows taut. The elder lifted his staff high, its carved symbols glowing faintly in the firelight. It was the edge of a storm that could shatter everything. But before the leader swung his arm down to command the attack, a sharp whistle cut through the night. Every head turned toward the ridge above the valley. A lone Apache scout stood there, holding something small and wrapped in leather. The bundle. The same one Lyria had found near the river. The scout waved it high so both sides could see it clearly. Voices murmured. The riders shifted, confused. Even the horses stilled as if sensing the shift in the wind. The elder stepped forward, calling out that the truth behind the bundle must be known before any blood touched the ground. His voice rang with authority that neither side could ignore. The riders hesitated. The leader shouted back that nothing inside it mattered unless it was returned to whoever had sent them. The elder ignored the anger in his tone and motioned for the scout to bring it down. The scout descended the ridge with careful steps. Warriors parted to let him through. Cale stepped aside as the scout placed the bundle onto the stone table. Lyria felt her heart pounding as she recognized the familiar shape. The same knot in the leather, the same weight she once carried without knowing what it meant. The elder looked at Cale, then at Lyria.
Yeah.
Then opened the bundle. Inside lay a small carved stone, smooth and shaped like a crescent. Along its surface were etched symbols Lyria did not understand, but Cale did. His eyes widened with recognition and surprise. The elder touched the stone gently, explaining in a low voice that it was a marker belonging to a peace. Agreement made long ago between an Apache leader and a land baron who once ruled the valley. The agreement promised safe passage for Apache families in exchange for protection of the baron's trade routes. But the baron's sons had broken the treaty after his death, claiming they had no knowledge of it. Cale stepped forward, realizing the truth. The hunters worked for those sons. They wanted the stone because it proved their family had betrayed the agreement. If the truth came out, they could lose their claim to the land they controlled. Lyria gasped softly as she understood her role in the conflict. She had not stolen anything. She had simply found evidence of a broken promise that powerful men wanted buried. The elder lifted the stone high so the riders could see it. The leader's face twisted with recognition, then anger. He demanded it be returned, shouting that it belonged to his employers. The elder answered calmly that it belonged to the truth and the land it protected. Without it, the valley would fall in two. Hands that did not honor agreements or respect boundaries. Cale stepped closer to Lyria and whispered that everything now depended on whether the riders would risk exposing their employers' lies. Lyria looked at the riders, noticing uncertainty spreading across their faces. They were hired men, not ones eager to fight a war over a stone with history carved into it. The leader realized his hold on them was slipping. He tried one last time to rally them, raising his arm again. But this time, the riders behind him did not move. Some lowered their torches. Some bowed their heads. A few even turned their horses away, unwilling to fight a battle that no longer felt just. The leader's voice cracked with frustration as he ordered them forward. But no one answered. Cale stepped forward, his presence steady and strong. He told the leader the chase was over, that the land itself had spoken against him. The elder added that, if the leader wished to resolve the matter with honor, he should return and warn his employers that the truth would no longer be buried. The leader glared at the Apache warriors, then at Lyria, then at Cale. He knew he had lost. With a final look of defeat, he spun his horse around and rode into the darkness. One by one, the remaining riders followed, their torches dimming until the valley held only the soft glow of the Apache campfires. Lyria let out a breath she had been holding for far too long. Her knees weakened, and Cale placed a steady hand on her back to keep her upright. The camp slowly relaxed, warriors lowering their weapons as the danger faded into the desert night. Children peeked from their shelters again. Women stepped out to relight the fires. The elder turned to Lyria and placed the carved stone in her hands. He told her she had carried something important without knowing its worth. She had been hunted not because of wrongdoing, but because the truth was feared by those who sought power. Lyria looked at the stone, feeling its weight shift from fear to purpose. Cale watched her with quiet pride. She asked the elder what should be done with it now. He smiled faintly and said the stone should remain with someone who respected its meaning, someone who understood the danger it carried and the peace it represented. He looked toward Cale, then at her, and Lyria felt her heart warm with understanding. As the fire crackled, Cale offered his hand and guided her away from the crowd. They walked toward the edge of the camp, where the sky stretched wide and peaceful. He told her she had shown courage most people never find, even when fear pressed close. She told him she only survived because he appeared when the world seemed to close in on her. Cale shook his head gently, saying their paths had crossed because the land had decided it was time for truth to rise. Lyria asked him what would happen now. He looked toward the horizon, where faint light from dawn began to touch the sky. He said the valley would need healing. The broken treaty would need to be exposed, and people would have to learn that peace was stronger than lies. But he also told her she no longer had to run. She could choose where her life would go next. Lyria looked at the early morning sky, feeling the first calm she had known in a long time. She realized she did not want to return to the settlement where fear had shaped her days. She did not want to hide anymore or shrink herself to avoid trouble. She wanted a life with meaning, with purpose, with hope. She turned to Cale and asked if she could stay with his people, at least until she found her footing again. Cale smiled. For the first time, a warm and quiet smile that held strength and softness at once. He told her she was welcome among his people and that she had already earned a place in their story. He said the land was wide. There was room for anyone willing to walk it with respect and courage. Together they watched as the sun climbed slowly over the ridge, spilling gold across the camp. Lyria felt the warmth reach her face, washing away the shadows of the chase. She held the carved stone close, knowing it no longer represented fear, but a promise. A promise of truth, of peace, of a new beginning. Cale stood beside her, steady as ever, and she knew she had found something rare in this wild frontier. A protector, a guide, and perhaps something deeper that time would reveal. The valley lay open before them, no longer a place of danger, but a place of hope. And as the new day began, Lyria stepped into it with strength she never knew she had, knowing she would not walk it alone.